All right. So, oh wait, typo. That is Friday, 3:20. Okay. So let's get on with it. All right, I'm going to start at the bottom since it doesn't require that much space. So let's evaluate the following before we do the find the solution set part. So let's evaluate the absolute value of 64. Remember, if there's a number inside the bars, it just asks me how far is 64 from 0. 64 steps forward is just 64 steps. So the absolute value of 64 is in fact 64. Okay, moving on to number 2, the absolute value of negative 71. Remember, it's asking how far is 71 steps backwards? 71 steps backwards is still 71 steps. Okay? Number 3, the absolute value of 0 is asking how far is 0 from 0? It is 0 steps away. And you see why I keep referring back to it because it's very confusing. The absolute value of negative 2.75. How far is negative 2. How far is backwards 2.75 miles? It is still 2.75 miles. The Fitbit does not care. Okay? If you need more time for the green problems, you can pause the video. Okay? Moving on to the blue problems. Okay? Now, there's algebra. There are variables inside of the bars, which means that we have to account for all values of j that get me a distance of 9. So, first things first, are the bars isolated? Is the output positive or negative? Okay, so it's positive. That means that there are 2 solutions for it. In order to go a distance of 9 steps, I can go 9 steps forward or 9 steps backwards. Either way, the absolute value of 9 is 9. The absolute value of negative 9 is also 9. Moving on to problem number 2, the absolute value of n is 55. The question is asking how do I get a distance of 55 steps? The output is positive, which means that it tells me I'm going to go either forwards 55 steps or backwards 55 steps. I'm going to get a better black marker once this is done. I can get n equals negative 55 as well. The absolute value of 55 is 55. The absolute value of negative 55 is also 55. Okay? Number 3, the absolute value of k is negative 35. Are the bars isolated? Yes, the bars are by itself. Is the output positive or negative? The output is negative. How do I get a distance of negative 35? Negative distance is not real. So we say k has no solution. I can't plug anything in where the bars will generate a negative output. Okay, moving on. The absolute value of t equals 0. How do I get a distance of 0? Well, how do I go nowhere? You go nowhere. So t equals 0. Anytime the bars are isolated and it equals 0, then there's only one solution. Okay? Number 5, the absolute value of x is negative 10. Are the bars isolated? Yep. Is the output positive or negative? It's negative. Well, nothing I plug in there, not 10, not negative 10, because they're just going to spit out positive 10 if I plug them into the absolute value bars. X has no solution. When the bars equal a negative output, that problem is impossible to solve. And finally, for the last one, the absolute value of Q is 70. Well, are the bars isolated? Is the output positive or negative? It's positive. So that tells me that there are two solutions to this. So Q can go 70 steps forward, or Q can go 70 steps backwards. So therefore, Q can be equal to 70 or negative 70. Okay. We're going to do some one-step equations now where we solve for the unknown variable. It's going to require a little bit of algebra. Okay. All right, so now let's get on to finding the solution set with one-step equations. Okay. Number 1, the absolute value of x minus 4 equals 9. So notice, I'm not Mr. Nice Guy in this. I'm not giving you just the absolute value of x, I'm giving you the absolute value of x minus 4 equals 9. Well, what's the big picture? The big picture is I can cover the bars and say, how do I get a distance of 9? So just relax, take a deep breath. So the bars need to be a distance of 9. That's when I split into two cases. Notice that the inside can be 9 or negative 9. So I set the expression inside equal to both the forwards and the backwards. I'm going to put a big old or in the middle. Find the solution set. Let's start with the right side since I'm a positive person. So how do I solve for x? X minus 4 equals 9. I want to get x isolated, so I need to undo that one step. How do I undo minus 4? Right, I'm going to add 4 to both sides of the equation. Minus 4 cancels out with plus 4, getting me x equals 13. But is that the only solution? Now, we're going to check out the other side. So let's do x minus 4 equals negative 9. So I'm going to isolate x. I need to get rid of that minus 4 layer on both sides. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Get your calculator. We get x isolated. X is equal to negative 9 plus 4, which is negative 5. And if you don't believe me for a millisecond, you can check your work. So I'm going to check on the right side. I'm going to plug in x equals 13 into the equation. So let's say I go blank minus 4, and I'm going to see where this route takes me. So if I go 13 minus 4, that's going to get me 9 in the absolute value bars. And the absolute value of 9 is 9. Check. That's what I wanted. But is that the only solution that satisfies that equation? No. So I've got x equals negative 5. I'm going to check plugging in x equals negative 5 into that equation. So I've got x minus 5, sorry about that, that's a typo. X minus 4, where x is negative 5. So negative 5 minus 4 is negative 9, but remember, we are still in the absolute value bars. What is the absolute value of negative 9? Still 9. Therefore, we have satisfied both requirements that make this statement true. The inside can be equal to 9 or negative 9. Okay. See if you can do the next problem on your own. Okay, number 2. You put the absolute value bars in. The absolute value of x plus 12 is 20. See if you can do this problem independently. Okay. All right. So once again, are the bars isolated? Do the bars equal a positive or a negative output? They equal a positive output, which indicates that there's a forwards and a backwards. So let's split this up into 2 cases. So x plus 12 can equal 20, or x plus 12 can equal negative 20. Once again, the inside can either be 20 or negative 20 to satisfy this. So then, I want to get x isolated. So I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. X is now isolated. We get negative 20 minus 12, which is negative 32. Let's check the right side of the equation. X plus 12 is equal to 20. And we want to undo that plus 12 layer by subtracting 12 on both sides. So 20 minus 12 is 8. And we can check our work by plugging into both equations the solutions that we got. Okay, so let's plug it in over here. So I'm going to plug in negative 32 for x. Negative 32 plus 12 is negative 20. And the absolute value of negative 20 is in fact 20, which is just what we wanted right there. Is that the only solution though? No. So let's check the other side. Let's plug in x equals 8. 8 plus 12 is 20. We're going to check our work. The absolute value of 20 is in fact 20. So there are 2 ways to get the same solution. Okay. The next one is going to be a special case. Spoiler alert. Okay, so let's say I've got this. The absolute value of x minus 10 is negative 8. So I've got the bars isolated, and I'm going to check the output. Is the output for the bars positive or negative? It's negative. So what I can do is I look at this and I go, well, the bars can never equal a negative output. So the bars can't equal a negative. So even though there's x minus 10 in here, the fact of the matter is I don't care because the bars can't equal negative. There's no such thing as negative distance. X has no solution. The solution to problem number 3 is that there is no solution. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 more and then we're going to call it a day. Okay, there's going to be a problem number 6. And then we're going to call it a day. Number 4, the absolute value of x minus 2 equals 25. When you're done with that, the absolute value of x plus 12 is equal to 1. And then finally, the last problem of the day, the absolute value of x plus 11 equals negative 15. Let me just make sure the camera has all of them in there, because last time, I think it got cut off a little bit. Okay, perfect. See if you can do these problems independently. Okay. You can use the pause button to get more time. So for now, let's do it. Absolute value bars. Does this equal a positive output or a negative output? A positive output. So I'm going to split this into 2 cases. Specifically, x minus 2 can equal negative 25, or x minus 2 can equal positive 25. Now, I solve for both cases separately. So I've got x minus 2 is equal to 25, so let me solve this one-step equation. How do I undo that layer? I want to undo that minus 2 layer by adding 2 to both sides, getting me x equals positive 27. Is that the only solution? No. So I'm going to check the other side. X minus 2 equals negative 25. I'm going to do the same process. I'm going to add 2 to both sides to undo that outer layer. So x is equal to whatever negative 25 plus 2 is. You get a calculator. That's going to be negative 23. So x has 2 solutions. I'm going to plug in 27 minus 2 is 25. The absolute value of 25 is 25. Let's try the other one. I'm going to plug in negative 23 in for x. Negative 23 minus 2 is negative 25, and the absolute value of negative 25 is in fact 25. There are 2 ways to get the same result. Number 5. The absolute value of x plus 12 is equal to 1. Is this output going to be positive or negative? Okay, it's going to be positive, so that means I can break this up into 2 cases. So I've got big or. So I've got x plus 12 is equal to negative 1, or x plus 12 is equal to positive 1. So now, let's solve for both cases separately. So I've got x plus 12 equals negative 1. I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides, getting me x equals negative 13. The other case is x plus 12 equals 1. So I'm going to subtract both sides by 12, getting me x equals 1 minus 12, or negative 11. I'm going to plug in both solutions to check my work. Negative 11 plus 12. Negative 11 plus 12 is positive 1, and the absolute value of 1 is 1. Check the other one just to make sure. Negative 13 plus 12 is negative 1, but the absolute value of negative 1 is in fact 1. All right, down to the last problem of the week. We've got the absolute value bars, x plus 11 in the absolute value bars is equal to negative 15. The bars are isolated and it equals a positive or a negative output. That's right, we've got a negative output, so what do we know about absolute value? The bars themselves can never equal absolute value, I'm going to say bars can never equal a negative. So no matter what I plug in here, I don't care what x plus 11 is, this is impossible to solve. X has no solution. Okay, I hope you guys have a great weekend. I will see you back on YouTube on Monday.